When I'm waiting in line for something, I purposely do not pull out my phone. Instead, I take the opportunity to chat with those around me. I found over and over again that if I strike up a conversation in a small group of strangers, everyone around gets pulled into it and has a good time. We're social creatures and we like talking to each other. We're just scared to be the one who starts it.
I'm Jessica, and I used to live on Easy Street. I had nice things and I ate and drank whatever I wanted. But the truth was, I lived paycheck to paycheck at a job I hated. Eating and drinking whatever I wanted made me fat and miserable. I had constant heartburn and hangovers, and I was drowning in debt. Today, I'm fit and happy, and I want the same thing for you. Join me each week and let's commit to doing something hard together. Because it turns out that Easy Street is a dead end. The only way to become your best self is to take the path of most resistance.
How's it going out there? It's been chaos in my house this week. Let me tell you why. For about 4 years now, Nob and I have been working on the hardest challenge we've ever attempted. We're leaving the United States to live somewhere else. And yes, if you think that 4 years seems unreasonably long to accomplish that, you'd be right. In fact, it's taken so long that I'm pretty sure no one even believes we're actually moving. A couple of months ago, I was at a party with someone who hadn't seen me in about a year. She said, "Oh, hey, are you back in the States for a visit?" You should have seen her expression when I said, no, we haven't left yet. But it's not just her, it's everyone. My friend Rick just laughs and laughs when I say something about moving. Yeah, sure you are. But look, how well would it work out for you if you decided to move to another country randomly with no job lined up? Where would you go? How would you support yourself? When Nob and I decided we wanted to go somewhere else, we had no idea about how we were going to handle the logistics. We just knew that the American dream wasn't our dream, and it was time for something else. We looked into a few different countries that sounded appealing. Portugal was the front runner for a few months, but ultimately we decided on Costa Rica. Though I've lived in Oregon off and on for the last 20 years, I'm originally from Louisiana. You may hear that in my voice sometimes. If you're not from the United States, Oregon is much colder than Louisiana, and I hate being cold. Now, Oregon isn't like living in Alaska, and the part I live in isn't even the coldest part of the state, but it is still far too cold for me. So that ended up ruling out Portugal. It is just too far north. And even though Nob is from Oregon, he's over being cold too. So we set up some new parameters for our search. The only countries that we could consider had to be located between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. For those of you globally challenged, that's approximately 23 degrees above and below the equator. Here in the Americas, that's a band that roughly starts at the bottom of Baja California and runs across the top of Cuba. The southern limit crosses South America through the middle of Paraguay and southern Brazil. Costa Rica is located about 10 degrees above the equator, and I think everybody's heard of Costa Rica. Over the last 4 years, whenever I mentioned it to anyone here in the United States, either they had visited it there themselves or they knew someone who had, and quite a few people even knew someone who had moved there permanently. At first, this seemed like the best step. I've always been enamored with Latin America, and I thought Costa Rica would be the perfect place to get our feet wet since it's the most Americanized or westernized or full of gringos, whatever you want to call it. Nob has never left the country before, and I don't think he understands yet that culture shock is a real debilitating thing. And while he may not succumb to it at all, starting in a country where a lot of people speak English would definitely help mitigate it. So that was the plan. We're moving to Costa Rica. But how? 4 years ago, both of us were still trapped in the rat race. Though we'd done a good job managing our debt, we hadn't done such a good job with our retirement savings, meaning we don't have any. In fact, as I tell you this now, we still don't have any money saved for retirement. Zip. Zilch, zero, nada. Now, that's not the same as saying we don't have an emergency fund. We have money set aside for emergencies, but if we had to live off of it, it'd probably only last about 6 months. The point is, we're not wealthy. We're not moving to Costa Rica and never working again. We still need an income. But the Rentista visa program would cover our expenses for 2 years, so we decided to go with that. To get a 2-year temporary residency in Costa Rica, you have to show the government that you have $60,000 in a bank account and that it'll be doled out to you at a rate of $2,500 per month, which will take 2 years. By selling our house here in Oregon, we'd have the $60K that buys us 2 years in Costa Rica. Now, we didn't have a plan for what we do when the 2 years are up. Hell, most of the time, we don't have a plan for what we're doing next week, much less what we would do in some unknown future that hasn't even played out yet. But we had to get to Costa Rica first before we could figure out what comes afterwards. I've probably never mentioned it here, but Knob and I have a YouTube channel, Snail Racing. I'll link to it in the show notes if you want to check it out. But basically, it's a garage/overlanding channel because Knob and I met in automotive school. We had 2 project vehicles that had to be completed and sold before we could close down the garage and put the house on the market. By the way, I don't use the word overlanding in real life. That's like a new word for an old thing. Just call it camping, dude. So, anyway, halfway through the 4 years, we decided that we should take the show on the road and become YouTubers who camped and wheeled with local off road clubs across the country. Costa Rica got put on the back burner for a minute while we reconfigured to live and travel full time out of Knob's 1989 Toyota 4Runner, the Snail. After 6 weeks on the road, though, we realized we didn't really want to do that. We enjoyed the parts where we were camping and just hanging out in nature. However, the travel involved from getting from one beautiful location to the next wasn't really all that. Setting up camp and tearing it down all the time was annoying, no matter how efficient we made the process. If all we wanted to do was sit outside and enjoy the weather, why not do that on our own farm somewhere? With that thought in mind, we turned the truck around and drove straight back to Oregon so we could do that. We got back, unloaded the truck, and started finishing those 2 project vehicles, a 1963 Datsun Fairlady and a 1985 Toyota 4Runner. And if you want to check any of the vehicles out or our road trip, it's all on the YouTube channel. I'm happy to report that now both of those vehicles are gone and sold, and we're almost ready to put the house on the market. That's why it's been chaos this week. This is the week our remaining household goods are going into storage, and we're moving back into the truck for another epic road trip. This one is one way, however. We're going to meander our way to Louisiana one more time, visiting friends and enjoying the scenery. From there, we'll be departing the United States, but it won't be for Costa Rica. Because it's taken us 4 years to reach this stage of the adventure, we've had a lot of time to reflect on what it is we're really looking for. It's also enabled me to build an online income for myself, which resolves the challenges of where our money is going to come from in the future. It's not much money, though, so I need to be able to stretch it. Rather than go to Costa Rica, a country bursting with foreigners that have driven up the cost of living, we're going to head deeper into South America and look for a more authentic experience. I'll be talking about this journey more and more over the next year because this podcast is all about challenges. And if moving to another country with a different culture isn't a challenge, then I don't know what is. What I do know is a challenge for sure, though, is the one we're tackling next week. So let's talk about that now. Okay, I know I just changed the challenge format last week, but I'm going to change it again this week. As I mentioned before, this podcast is and will always be a work in progress. I was trying to gamify the challenges by creating a point scoring system, but honestly, if there's no leaderboard and there's no prizes for the most points, then what exactly is your motivation to keep score? I mean, it's my podcast, but I'm not even keeping my own score. So I think for now, I'm going to drop the point scoring system altogether. Nothing else is going to change. As always, if you want to play the game with us, you'll need to subscribe on Substack so you can get on the email list for the bonus material each week, which will include tips and tricks for killing the challenge, recommended books for further reading on the subject, and whatever else I feel like including. There just won't be a scorekeeping section anymore. The bonus material is 100% free to sign up for, but if you upgrade to a paid subscription, you'll also get access to the community chat and the weekly Zoom challenge check-in calls. Twice a week, I'm available live so we can talk about the struggles around the challenge, and that's only for paid subscribers. But you don't have to upgrade to get the bonus material. Just sign up for free on Substack, and you're in the game. And the game for next week is to put down your phone. The average person spends 4 hours a day on their phone. That's 28 hours a week, almost a full-time job. Now, I'm sure that some of what you're doing on there is legit. We're not always slacking on social media when our phone is in our hand. We use them for work as well, but having our phone in our hand has become a second nature replacement for spending time in our own heads. And that's no bueno. You see, when we're mindlessly scrolling through cute dog videos, and I am extremely guilty of doing that, we're receiving input. Most of the time when we're on our phones, that's what we're doing, receiving input. Input, input, input. But your brain isn't a trash can, it's a computer. And when you dump stuff in it all day without taking the time to process any of it, it becomes overloaded and full of stress. I can always tell when I've spent too much time on my phone because when I try to go to bed, I can't fall asleep. My mind is racing because this is the first opportunity it's had to try and process all the stuff I've been dumping into it. That also happens when I watch a movie right before bed, too. That's why I try to journal every night so I can process it all before I try and go to sleep. But it's not just about processing all the data you've absorbed. Let me illustrate with a different organ of the body, the liver. You may have heard somewhere along the way that drinking alcohol causes liver damage. The liver has a few jobs, but one of them is to process toxins in our body and get rid of them. Well, when you drink alcohol every day, your liver has to process alcohol every day. And that means sometimes it doesn't get around to processing anything else because you've kept it busy working on all that alcohol. So your liver gets stuck in a loop and your overall health never reaches its optimal potential. If we apply that same logic to the brain, a similar end result occurs. Input isn't a bad thing, but when you're only inputting and not outputting, you're not reaching your optimal potential. You got to spend some time thinking about the data you've taken in and what you can do with it. For example, if you want to become a YouTuber, you can spend hours going down the rabbit hole on how to make the best titles and the best thumbnails, the perfect length of a video, what's the best camera, what's the best format, etc., etc. But none of that input does you any good unless you turn it into an output and actually make a video. Sadly, though, I don't think most of us are using our phones to learn new skills like how to make a YouTube video. No, it's mostly to watch funny pet videos and other people's drama. We love other people's drama, don't we? I'm not better than anyone else, though I'd rather watch Kitchen Nightmares than The Bachelorette. I'm still watching it for other people's drama, right? So those are the two separate problems I see around how much we keep our phone in our hands. Number one, we don't put them down long enough to process the information and do something with it. And two, we're using it as a distraction. In a way, I think that's worse. It's the same thing as using drugs or alcohol to escape the world when you do it with your phone, and you can't tell me otherwise. We're never going to get out of this mess if we keep choosing short-term escapes instead of dealing with the problems. Here's how we're going to approach this challenge. First, we're going to track our usage. Now, for some people, this feature may be turned off on your phone. So if you have an iPhone, the feature is called iOS Screen Time. For Androids, it's Digital Wellbeing. Find the feature and turn it on if it's not already. For the first few days, you don't need to change anything. Use your phone as you normally do. But on the fourth day, sit down with your phone and take a look at the usage reported by these apps. It should give you a breakdown of not only the total time you've spent on your phone each day, but how much time you spend with each particular app. If you spent 6 hours on your phone on Tuesday and 3 hours of that was on Facebook, that is an extremely obvious one that you can improve on. I use the digital wellbeing feature on my phone to set limits. For example, I only allot myself 15 minutes on Instagram a day. I also recently set a timer on my email because I realized I was checking it like a crack addict. It's not just social media that can grab your attention. I definitely don't have any games installed on my phone because that's like setting the crack out on a lovely 24-hour buffet. I will eat it. When I'm waiting in line for something, I purposely do not pull out my phone. Instead, I take the opportunity to chat with those around me. I found over and over again that if I strike up a conversation in a small group of strangers, everyone around gets pulled into it and has a good time. We're social creatures, and we like talking to each other. We're just scared to be the one who starts it. There's not always a chance to chat, though. In those cases, I still refrain from pulling out my phone, unless I'm in the middle of a good book on my Kindle. Sometimes I'll read because while I was joking about the phone being crack earlier, I really am addicted to reading. Nonfiction takes me a bit longer because I like to stop and think about what I'm learning from it, but hand me a Brandon Sanderson novel and I will be unable to move until I finish the whole thing. And he's one of those crazy authors whose books are 600 pages minimum, so sometimes my life comes to a standstill for days. I'm old enough now that I figured out I need to plan around his book releases or I'm screwed. So that's our goal for this week's challenge. Try to resist the siren call of your cell phone. Track your time, learn how you're using it, and put time limits on the apps that are giving you the most problems. When you have to kill time, spend it with your brain instead of your phone. Remember that your phone is a tool, not an escape pod. Don't forget to sign up on Substack to get the bonus material around this challenge. Speaking of challenges, we are still doing the month of May challenge to get 600 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity. We're close to the end of the first week, and if you're on track, you should be around 100 minutes right now. I'm only at 84, so I know I need to step it up a bit, literally. And hey, you don't have to do anything you hate to get those minutes. My favorite way to get them, besides going for a walk in nature, is to dance. Seriously, crank up the music in your living room for 30 minutes and just dance. One of my dogs really likes to dance with me. It's hilarious. So, not only am I doing good things for my heart, I'm joyous while I'm doing it. I don't think it gets any better than that. That'll do it for this week. If you're already a subscriber, look for the bonus material in your inbox later today. If you're not a subscriber, sign up for free on Substack to receive it before the challenge begins on Monday. Link in the show notes. Thanks for joining me as always, and until next week, you can do it. I believe in you. Peace. The challenges are always free, but if you want to get more out of them, you can join the Path of Most Resistance as a paid subscriber on Substack. This option will get you access to the community chat, along with a link to the weekly challenge check-in calls. Want to push yourself even harder? I also do one-on-one coaching. Click the link in the show notes to book your free discovery call with me. Thanks for listening, and if you're enjoying the show, please share it with anyone else you think is up for a challenge.